Hey everyone, ever wondered what makes your favorite websites feel so alive? You know, that magic that happens when you click on things and they just work? Well, the answer is a pretty amazing language called JavaScript. And today, we're going to break down the three big ideas that make it all tick: how it stores information, how it makes decisions, and how it handles big lists of stuff. Let's dive in.
Really think about it for a second. When you click that like button and the number just shoots up instantly. Or when you're filling out a form online and it warns you about a typo before you even hit submit. How in the world does that happen? It seriously feels like magic, but it's the closest thing we've got to it on the web.
Yep, you guessed it. JavaScript is the engine that's running under the hood. So if you think of HTML as the skeleton of a web page, giving it structure, and CSS as the clothes, making it all look good, then JavaScript is the brain and the nervous system. It's the part that brings it all to life with intelligence and interactivity. So how do we even start to build that intelligence into a website? Well, it all begins with memory. Before a program can do anything remotely smart, it has to have a way to remember things. And that brings us to our very first pillar: storing information. Okay, so check this out. In the world of programming, we store information in something called a variable. And honestly, the best way to think about this is like a spice jar in your kitchen, right? You've got jars labeled salt, pepper, or oregano. Each jar has a name, a label, and it holds something specific inside. A variable is exactly that. It's just a labeled container in our code that holds a piece of information for us. And just like your kitchen jars hold different kinds of spices, variables can hold different types of data. The most common ones you're going to run into are numbers, for stuff like your age or the price of an item. Then you've got strings, which is just a fancy programmer word for text, like a person's name or a comment. And finally, you have Booleans. These are super simple but incredibly powerful. A Boolean can only be one of two things: true or false. That's it. Yes or no, on or off. Now, to actually create these containers in JavaScript, we use a couple of special keywords. Back in the day, everyone just used var for everything. The problem was, var could get pretty confusing and lead to some really weird bugs. So modern JavaScript introduced two new, much safer options. We use let for variables that we expect to change, like a player's score in a game, and we use const for constants, values that we set once and never ever want to change, like the value of pi. This just makes our code way more predictable and a lot easier to work with. Okay, so our program can now remember stuff. It's got a memory filled with these variables. What's the next logical step to building something intelligent? Well, you have to teach it how to make decisions based on all that information it's holding on to. This is where the computer actually starts to think. And the way it thinks is, it's surprisingly human. I love this analogy from the source material. It's kind of like when neighbors compare their kids' test scores. Is my score greater than your score? Is it less than yours? Or are they exactly equal? That's precisely what our code does. It uses these things called comparison operators to check two values and see if a statement is true or false. So what do we do with that true or false answer? We use a structure called an if-else statement. Think of it like a fork in the road for your program. First, you ask a question. That's the condition. For instance, is the variable named age greater than 18? If the answer is true, the code goes down one path and does something, like showing the message you can vote. But else, if the answer is false, it goes down the other path and does something totally different, like showing you cannot vote. This simple if this, then that logic is the bedrock of all decision-making in code. All right, we're making progress. Our code can store single pieces of information, and it can make decisions based on them. But what happens when we're dealing with tons of related info? Not just one superhero name, but a whole team of them. Not just one student's grade, but the grades for the entire class. This brings us to our third and final pillar: managing collections. To handle whole collections of data, JavaScript gives us this awesome tool called an array. You can think of an array like a big filing cabinet drawer. It's a single container that can hold a whole bunch of items, all neatly organized in a specific order. So instead of making a separate variable for every single thing, we can just group them all together under one name. And this is a perfect example. See this? We have one single variable called heroes, but inside that one variable, we're storing a whole list of names: Thor, Spider-Man, Iron Man. This is so much more efficient. Now, if we want to work with our list of heroes, we just have to refer to this one heroes array. We can add new heroes to it, remove them, or go through them one by one. So there we have it, our three pillars: storing information with variables, making decisions with if-else, and managing lists with arrays. Now, for the grand finale. Let's see how this all comes together. Because the real power, the real magic of programming isn't using these ideas by themselves. It's about combining them to create something truly dynamic. Okay, let's break down this little piece of code right here. First, you can see we're using an array, that's our third pillar, to create a list of numbers. Simple enough. Now, how do we look at each number in that list? We use something called a for loop. A loop is just a way to tell the computer, hey, I want you to repeat this action for every single item in this collection. So it grabs the first number, runs our code, grabs the second, runs the code again, and so on. And what's the code it runs? Well, inside that loop, we're using an if statement, our second pillar, to make a decision. That little bit of math, num%2 equals 0, is just a programmer's way of asking, is this number even? If the answer is true, we print the number. If it's false, we just do nothing and move on to the next one. And just like that, in only a few lines of code, we've combined all three of our pillars. We're storing a collection of data in an array, we're repeating an action for every item with a loop, and we're making a decision during each one of those repetitions with an if statement. Storing, deciding, and repeating. This isn't just the core of JavaScript. This is the core of pretty much all programming. And you know, that's what's so incredible. That crazy, complex social media feed you scroll through every day, that immersive online game you love to play, deep down, they're all built from these same fundamental ideas: storing data, making decisions, and managing collections, just on a much, much bigger scale. So the real question is, now that you know the basic building blocks, what are you going to build first?